Hey folks, walk with me. The Delphi double murder of Abby and Libby finally coming to a close. And I've been listening to reports from folks in the room, and I've tried my best to listen to some that seem to me to be fairly pro-defense, and have also listened to some that seem to me to be fairly pro-prosecution. So trying to not get myself sucked into the pendulum that is the wild swings that people make and take as it pertains to their perspective on whether or not Richard Allen is guilty. And so I just wanted to talk about a few things that stood out or that stand out to me as we wait for the verdict. Now, one thing to get it out of the way that I still have a really hard time with, and maybe it's true that it's irrelevant to the actual crime, but I have a really hard time getting over the fact of Keegan Kline. And unless I'm like misremembering something, because we've been at this for 7 years, is that right? 2017, I guess almost 8 years. But the info about Keegan Kline and the Anthony Shots account didn't come out until relatively recently. But if I'm remembering correctly, the idea that he was doing the things he was doing, and that there was this Anthony Shots profile that I think Libby was talking to. And we know that they were targeting kids. It's just really sad and awful to think that if there was no connection there, that these kids, these girls, were sort of double targets in this tiny little town in Indiana, which seems crazy to me. But I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, and I guess if there was seemingly some connection, if they were allowed to, I guess is the other thing, I would think the defense would be going, leaning really hard into that, which even when they got slapped around and in trouble early on there for the Odinism stuff, they went that route, right? They didn't go the Keegan Kline route, which seems like the more obvious route to take if you're going to offer up alternative theories. And maybe they weren't allowed to present that at all at trial, but they didn't need to, because they also didn't when they had a chance to with the, when they went down the Odinism path. So I'm just throwing that out there as something that still is like really shocking to me. Because when that news came out, that Libby had contact with this fake account, and then finding out the ties to that fake account and what those people were doing, it seemed like obvious stuff, right? But yeah, that's crazy to me. And like I said, just uniquely sad, or maybe not uniquely sad. And in this tiny town in Indiana, if those two parties are unrelated, that these girls were just, double targeted. So, in any case, let's go relatively recently, because I feel like a lot of the compelling stuff, or at least for me, the stuff that stood out, was relatively recent. The headphone situation, that's bizarre, to say the least, right? This idea that, again, if I'm understanding it correctly and getting this reporting second or third hand sort of, because there's no AV allowed in the courtroom. So you have to rely on the accurate reporting of others. But my understanding is milliseconds before, this headphone jack apparently got connected to headphones, maybe, that there was a call coming in, and that's, I think AT&T was trying to connect the phone. Because of that, headphone jack gets activated, so there's no ringing that can happen. And then I think, and that was at like 5 something, I think, right? So this should have been when everything was done, right? There should be no activity on there. And then I think the disconnect was coming in the 10 o'clock p.m. hour. That really nothing should have been happening then. So that was quite compelling. It was interesting in a way because it just sort of like opened up a door or a lane of, you know, if headphone jack was really getting plugged in and unplugged, then something else, some story hasn't been told yet, right? Because that's a different story. There's other significant pieces of the puzzle if that's really happening. On the other hand, if it's getting activated because of debris, water, something like that, and then eventually those things are sort of, you know, the water's evaporating, the debris is settling or something, and it sort of shows a headphone jack being engaged when it is wet or debris filled, and then, you know, triggering the headphone jack off response or disconnect response when it dries out, maybe. But yeah, it just felt to me like that opened up a lane of possibilities, but there was no, you know, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so maybe there's not really the opportunity, maybe it's not really allowable to continue further down that path other than to just say, our expert says that these things happened. And that completely destroys the timeline if that was actually happening. So that I found quite compelling. The rereading of the confessions, especially the first confession, which I think happened the day before, like when he's trying to tell his wife Kathy, and she's just rejecting it totally, right? She's like, no, you didn't do it. And then the next day he starts exhibiting these signs of psychosis. But the way that I understood sort of the chronology of everything was that initial confession to his wife happened at a time when he was clearly not displaying signs of psychosis. Now, could there be some sort of gray area in there? I'm sure, right? Like the lead up to display of psychosis. Could you actually be somewhat engaged in a partially psychotic state? Maybe. I'm also not a mental health professional, so but I did find not just that confession, but others as well fairly compelling, including the piece about the white van. And obviously he put himself there. I feel like I get different information about the car parking situation, whereby the reporters that I feel tend to lean toward the prosecution do very much get they do very much get into this realm of he tried to conceal his license plate in his car, and he parked at this was it old CPS building or something, and I feel like some of the more defense-leaning reporters have been saying, again, this is where it gets confusing to people, the way I took what they were saying a few days ago was that he did park at the farm entrance. So it wasn't like a farm building, like a farm bureau. Not that misspeak that has been talked about forever, but rather he was saying that there's this land that's like private, so you can't trespass on it, but there's, I don't know, maybe some sort of easement or something on or adjacent to the land where people can park, can walk, and it's not considered trespassing, and that is by a farm. And so I think that the report that I heard was saying he didn't misspeak that he had parked at a farm bureau. He was saying he parked by the farm, or by the farm building, which is common. And again, to me, this can change significant details of the approach, right? Like, if you are coming at the trail or the bridge from this really awkward place of parking at the old CPS building and choosing to like take this just unnecessary route if your goal is to get up to the bridge to watch the fish. Now, me being someone who walks a lot, I'm familiar with taking a path that isn't the most direct, and yes, that can be fine. It's just the confluence of it all, and the tragic events that occurred at the same time make it a little bit questionable. But if he did park at a normal place, then that also sort of completely changes things. So I sort of still feel like I don't know what to make of that. But yeah, here we are. I don't have a good guess, to be honest, whether they'll come back quickly or, relatively quickly, or if it will just drag on and drag on and drag on and maybe be a hung jury. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And it's hard to not just feel terrible for all of the families involved. It's just really, really unfortunate that any of this is happening, but here we are. So whatever happens, right, some of those families are going to continue to be devastated. So yeah, it's really hard to know that no matter what the outcome is, there's going to be further devastation happening to those families. All right, folks. Well, if this was my foray into walks that includes some true crime. I don't know if you knew that I've gone through spurts of following this stuff much, much more closely than I am currently, but this one dates so far back and I've been tracking it for so long that, I thought I'd hop in and just sort of dip a toe in the Delphi water or the true crime water and see if anyone else was interested in, videos that include that as a topic. But if you walked with me, we got a bit over 13 minutes in, so good on us. And if you didn't, I certainly appreciate you watching. And as always, I will see you in the next video.